it's an incredible privilege to be here with so many of you guys. I've met some of you guys and have heard legend of others. And so it's good to put faces to many of you and have had that opportunity in the last year or so here, or a couple years, just in traveling and meeting you guys. It's been incredible. Just to hear your stories, the way the Lord's using you guys, and pretty amazing to be a part of this hockey ministries. But like John said, I wasn't so sure about the whole chaplain thing at the beginning. In fact, I hated it. It was
No,
it
no,
was a
no.
terrifying thing actually for me. It was unnerving. It was frustrating. It was difficult. Um, but by God's grace, He kept us in it and gave my wife and I a heart for it. We began to pray differently. We began to implore our church to pray differently and to get behind it more and so on, and so it took on new light. But the year of the accident, I just want to touch on that just a little bit. We have Jarrett here, and and I just wanted to make mention of some of the things I learned in, especially just in that year. I think that year in particular, having Darcy to walk shoulder to shoulder with for the past couple years, and then leading into that year, had I don't know that it had opened more doors, but it had, I guess, instilled in us a very heavy heart for that ministry. Darcy and I would often pray together about the guys, and it was just a heaviness on his heart and a heaviness on my heart, and it was just neat to walk shoulder to shoulder with a coach and with somebody else in that way, and then to be in that as a friend and to be able to share what's going on and so on, and then when you did have a spiritual victory, when the coach gets to rejoice with you, that's a pretty incredible privilege that I know not many of you have been able to have, but I'm very thankful to have had that. Um, Within that year, also had I came to terms with the fact that it's not all about me and what I can do. There was people that I wanted to give an opportunity, and so in a couple years previous, we had Jarrett come and play. He'd come through the chapel program. He was a local kid here in Humboldt, and so on. And I just was never sure where he was at with the Lord, and where he was at with the whole chapel thing. And then he went away to Trinity Western, and praise be to the Lord that once again he couldn't get away from God. The hound of heaven pursued him and got a hold of Jarrett's life, and it was amazing to hear the testimony of a changed life by the gospel and Jarrett, and to hear that, it was one of those moments where you just sort of rejoice and you know that you had very little to do with that. That was all God, and so that was a very exciting thing to hear. But we had Jarrett come back that year and give his testimony to guys that he had played with and guys that he knew. And I know that was a terrifying thing for Jarrett to do, but to share his faith journey there. And there was a line in his testimony. I've watched it a couple times. And in his story, first of all, he talked a lot about the change in his life in regards to sex and different things like that. And I know that resonated with some guys. And then he spoke one little line. He says, "You guys don't know how long you have. You could walk out this door and get hit by a truck." And that was the year of the accident. I will never forget that, even when he said it in the moment. But then looking back at that chapel, we had, I know Jarrett stayed behind and talked to one of his friends that had been on the team, and he spent a lot of time talking to him. There was another guy that lingered, and neither Jarrett or I got a chance to talk to him, but I'll touch on him in just a second. And then one more that stayed behind, and I led to the Lord that night, or that afternoon as well. And so just the testimony of Jarrett changed life by the gospel was a powerful moment. Um, Along with that, and along with the story, I wanted to just say this before we get into what I want to talk about from the Word, because timing is everything, isn't it? Sometimes it is long term. Sometimes we don't know the fruits. Are our labors in vain? Sometimes it feels like it. And after the accident, I had an awkward and horrible conversation with one of the young men who passed away, a local kid, his girlfriend, and she came up to me and about 2 days after the vigil, and just said, the first words out of her mouth were crazy. She just said, "What is so wrong with having sex before you're married?" And it was just the most bizarre question to be asked. Like, are you? Let's start the grieving process here, but that's the thing you're the most upset about. So I asked her, "What do you mean?" And so she started to pour out her heart that her boyfriend, this guy, had come home, and after Jarrett had spoken about sex and a transformed life, and that the gospel meant that his life and his desire for the Lord outweighs maybe his own desires and so on. And this guy had gone home and says, we can't do this anymore. I I got a new life, and he had told his girlfriend this, unbeknownst to me. Then his parents had found his Bible open, and just things that we didn't hear that testimony until after the accident. So I have a lot of hope, just in the fact that I was did my best to be faithful that year. We prayed ad nauseum in our church for those guys, to the point where someone in our church actually asked, "Can we pray about something else? Why do we pray for these guys so much?" And uh, and so we're glad we did now. We shared the gospel relentlessly that year, and more than I ever had. And I'm thankful for that freedom to know that we did what we could in that year and shared the gospel. And we don't know what the fruit of that will be. Coming out of the year of the accident was brutal. The last 3 years have been some of the hardest. Even I would compare to the first couple of years of being a chaplain. It's like we're learning this all over again. I'm going to read a Psalm 27 here in a little bit. And David often talks about his enemies. And I think many of us could look at our situations and look at coronavirus and whatever else as enemies. But I think many of our enemies aren't as violent as they are passive aggressive in our lives and in our ministries today. In the year after the accident, the board told the new coach that they couldn't get rid of the chapel program, so he did his best to supplement it, to bring in sports psychologists and everything else that would try to do what we did. Um, it's not that he was hostile; he was friendly, but he was very passive aggressive, very just dismissive of the whole thing. And I would say a lot of that's continued. And so it has been a very difficult last few years of ministry. Some of that has to do with just being tired, and just being not really knowing how to rebuild, not having that carryover of guys from one year to the next, and so on. And so it's been tough. And then this year, of course, you add that. So within these years, though, we look and we see these little glimpses, don't we, of just how the Lord keeps working. I got a text message about 6-7 months ago, just a random text message with a YouTube link. And so I clicked on it. I'm like, what is this thing? And I clicked on the YouTube link, and it was the vigil speech from a player that played 8 years ago. And so he had sent me the link to the vigil. I'm like, why are you sending me this? He says, oh, that was an accident. I meant to send that to my Bible study group, but I sent it to all my contacts accidentally. So I'm like, Bible study group? What are you talking about? Oh yeah. And I started into this Bible study group, and they asked me where my faith journey began. And so he just said, it started with chapel. And I just wanted to let you know that. And that was so, so incredible. 8 years later that some of this fruit is going to be born, and we're just never going to see it. I want to encourage you guys with the word. We're going to spend a little bit of time in it tonight. So if you have a Bible, great. I think Jeff, you also got it to put up on the screen. We're going to read Psalm 27 through the whole thing, and then I want to just touch on a few things for us that I hope will just encourage your heart in a very difficult, maybe a dry season. Psalm 27, starting in verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold, the stronghold of my life. In whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and my foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart will not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I ask, one thing I have asked for of the Lord, and that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire or to meditate in the temple. For he will hide me in the shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. And I will offer in the tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, seek my face. And my heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn not your servant away in anger, O you who have been my help. Cast me not off. Forsake me not, O God of my salvation. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a lovely path, or on a level path, I'm sorry, because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence. But I believe that I will look on the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Now it's just as it kicks off, I just wanted to touch a little bit on David. I mean, we know who David is, and but I just find it amazing that the first words out of his mouth are not, look at what I'm going through. It's, I know who God is, and that changes my perspective of what's going on. So he starts off, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Who shall I fear? Really, his fear is dissolved just by knowing the God that he serves. The Lord's my stronghold. Why should I be afraid? Basically, when evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh or to take away the things that are important to the physical life, or maybe our stature or status, and things that would matter to the rest of the world, doesn't matter because I trust the Lord. Um, though the enemy encamps around me, my heart will not fear. I will, I will be confident. I love that little line. I will be confident. But the next couple verses is actually where I wanted to just touch on and dwell on just for a little bit here. Um, and I think it's fitting for us to do once in a while. We need to just remind ourselves of the good news of the gospel. Verse 4 and 5, it says, "The Lord, one thing I ask, and one thing I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and meditate in His temple." I wanted to just touch on those things just very briefly here, and to remind you about the God that we serve. For David, that meant it dispelled the discouragement, the things that we so easily lose sight of, the fears that we might have, the frustrations in our ministry. It might be that people are taking away. It seems like our privileges might be taking away, or opportunities might be disappearing. It's getting harder to be a chaplain, especially in that first year back. I wrestled with that. Like, it's almost like the chapel program had been snatched away from us from what we had seen. Um, but I'll never forget when my wife said, after they had hired the sports psychologist to replace or to do what I was doing, basically, she just says, "Oh, good. Now you can focus on just Jesus. You don't have to worry about all the team building, all the psychology. Leave that up to Him, and let the Lord be faithful." And boy, was she right. I had more parents and grandparents talk to me that year to go and talk to their sons, because the sports psychologist was not giving them answers, wasn't helping them, was not even listening to them. And so I had more requests that year from parents and grandparents to actually go and talk to their kids and their grandkids that year. And I had more opportunities for the gospel in that year, one on one, than I ever had. And God used something that an enemy might have intended to rip from our flesh, and then to make it turned on their own heads, realize the deficiency that was there. But 4 and 5 leaves us not to marvel at at how that happens. It's all the Lord, and it's amazing that the Lord would do these things. And one thing I would ask, one thing that I would seek, to dwell in the house of the Lord all my days, and to gaze upon, underline that little phrase, the beauty of the Lord. Now, that's not a sissified beauty. So when we go down a number of verses, David also says, "I am confident that I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living." This is not, I can't wait to die and go to heaven. It's not just looking forward to something. And so hope is not just about, well, when we die, we get to go to heaven. Hope is also in the presence of getting to know. I want to know Christ and the fellowship of sharing in His sufferings, Paul says. Someone criticized him, or someone says, "Oh, we're going to kill you." Oh, to die is gain. Well, we're going to let you live then. Well, to live is Christ. Right on. It's beautiful. No matter what you do to me, it doesn't matter. And so it's an awesome perspective to have, like David. But the beauty of the Lord is an amazing one. And as I was thinking about this, I got thinking about Moses going up onto the mountain and saying, I want to see your glory. And what God says next kind of astounded me. I was just in this passage this week too. And so God says, I will make my goodness pass in front of you, but you can't see me face to face. And so even in his goodness and in his beauty is the potential that in that presence we would die. So when we gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, it is his goodness and all of his justice and his holiness and his power and his righteousness. All of those things dwell together. But God sums it up in that way. It is in his goodness, and his goodness even is that terrifying. And so his beauty is not a sissified beauty. The beauty of the Lord is his righteous justice wrapped up in the body of goodness in the person of Jesus Christ. And what a beautiful picture. And is that not where we want to dwell? Is that not what we want to be reminded of? A powerful God who holds everything, a sovereign God capable of doing whatever he wishes to do, and yet merciful in sending his son to die, extending grace to us and extending grace to our players, powerful enough to break down barriers of strongholds in people's life, even causing a person to yield from their pride or lusts or whatever, breaking down those barriers in the gospel. That's the God that we serve, and that's the God that I want to be with. I want to spend time there. I hope you're refreshed in your time with the Lord. One more place I want to take you is down to verse 6. The next one, it says, and now my head will be lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in the tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. If you go over a number of chapters to Psalm 42, it talks about David bringing in the throng of people. And so I felt like this was my mission. 42:4, it talks about David bringing in a throng who then joined together in raising up shouts of joy. Um, Within the temple and within the presence of God, there is community. And I want to tell you that in the year after the accident, as I got to travel and meet many of you, it was so encouraging, as difficult as our chapel was, to see the hand of the Lord moving and working through you guys as chaplains, and to hear incredible stories and victory stories there that we got to see. And within the congregation, that shout of joy. So I looked into this little idea. What is a shout of joy, and how is it different than making glad melodies and songs? I think it's just this opportunity. Carson Hogan is here too. Carson phoned me a couple days ago and just said, the Lord's been working on me. He's shaping my life. And I got to just sort of say, yes. And that's sort of the way I feel about a shout of joy. It's those things that sort of thrill you when you get a text message from a player, when you hear that someone has come to the Lord. Those shouts of joy are so refreshing, and we want to offer those up to the Lord as praise. To close off, I want to read the last verse of the Psalm 27, or the last two verses, and then I want to take you to a blessing of Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, and I'll finish off there. I believe that I will look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That is now. That's not after you die. So wait for the Lord and be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Let's go over to 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 48, or 58, I'm sorry. Therefore, brothers and sisters, might be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Don't lose heart, and just remember the God that we serve is beautiful and good.